What's up, everybody? I'm Sega Lord X, and in this episode, we are going to be taking a look at the Capcom's Generations line on the Sega Saturn. Now, there are 5 games in this series, ranging from not worth it at all to where you really have to think about picking it up because the games are so good, but the price is climbing on these games. So, let's go ahead and take a look at the Capcom Generations line on the Sega Saturn. Capcom Generation 1 consisted of 1942, 1943, and 1943 Kai. While 1942 and 1943 are good shooters in their own right, it's 1943 Kai that is the real star of this disc. Graphically and gameplay-wise, this game still holds up today and is intensely enjoyable. The 1940 series of games from Capcom always struck me as very difficult games, and 1943 Kai is no different. Planes simply don't pass you by sheepishly on screen. They fly back, side to side, and kamikaze your ass into submission. The enemy ships themselves are just as dangerous as the bullets. This disc will run you about $30 these days, and while that price isn't bad, you can get them elsewhere for a lot cheaper. Capcom Generation 2 had 3 of Capcom's best and hardest action games. You get Ghosts and Goblins, the awesome Ghouls and Ghosts, and the absolutely sublime Super Ghouls and Ghosts. All 3 of these games are challenging as hell, but they are great fun and still have much to offer today. Ghosts and Goblins is the hardest to go back to, as the game is less responsive and doesn't have the additions of its newer siblings. Both classic Ghouls and Ghosts and Super Ghouls and Ghosts hold up extremely well, however, and both offer up great challenge and fun. Both games still look fantastic, and both offer some of Capcom's best stage music. You'll be paying around $50 for this collection, and once again, these games can be gotten elsewhere for far cheaper. There is a certain prestige rocking out with a Sega Saturn pad to these classics though, and the port quality here is outstanding. If you love the series, you're sure to love this disc. I sure as hell did. Capcom Generation 3 is sort of the red-headed stepchild of these compilations. It consists of 4 very old Capcom games, including Vulgus, Sun, Pirate Ship Higemaru, and XX's. If you enjoyed the games, I do not mean to offend, but I was over each one of these games minutes into gameplay. They simply do not hold up well today. Not graphically, not in sound, and not in fun factor. Vulgus is a simplistic shooter that lacks excitement. Sun is a run and collect action game that holds your attention for a few minutes until you realize you're doing the same exact thing over and over. Pirate Ship Higemaru has a Bomberman vibe where you smash barrels into enemies instead of bombs. And XX's is another shooter that is a bit deeper than Vulgus, but still nowhere near deep enough to hold your attention. These games likely were awesome games in the early 1980s, but in 2017, they are flashes in the pan of my gameplay time. This game disc is a definite miss for me, and I cannot recommend it at all. It is the cheapest of the Generation titles on the Saturn at around $20, so grab it if you enjoyed these as a kid. Capcom Generations 4 is a port of 3 run-and-gun games consisting of Commando, Gunsmoke, and Mercs. If you're an NES kid, you'll likely remember the home ports of Commando and Gunsmoke on that system. The Saturn does the arcade ports here 100% with all the bells and whistles. Commando is a vertically scrolling run-and-gun similar to the likes of Rambo on the Sega Master System. Gunsmoke is an auto-scrolling shooter, more similar to shmups than anything. While all three of these games are still fun, Mercs is definitely the star of the show. The game is graphically still very appealing and has 3-player co-op support. The Genesis version had been watered down substantially from the arcade, but the Saturn does a full port with ease. The music is spot on and the game is challenging. You'll get some decent gunplay with all three of these classics, and it'll run you around $40. And while I hate to sound like a broken record, you can get these games elsewhere for far cheaper, so it's a hard recommendation. If you want some great shooting action on the Saturn though, it's a great disc to have in your collection. Capcom Generation 5 was the last and best entry into this series in my opinion. It had all three original variations of Street Fighter II. The classic first untouched release, the Champion Edition second release, and the third release, Street Fighter II Turbo Hyper Fighting. These games look and play incredible, and I don't really think I need to go into any great detail explaining to you why. These games are inarguable classics, and the Saturn gives them to you in all their arcade glory. Retreat animations intact, perfect sound effects, huge characters, and dead-on background details. These ports absolutely scream quality. The Saturn pad fits the intense 6-button gameplay perfectly, and you'll never miss a fireball or uppercut with its perfection in your hands. It's one of the best compilations on the system, bar none. But alas, I cannot recommend it to you. In recent years, the price of this one has shot up to around $100 for a complete copy. And while I believe these to be some of the best playing home versions of these games, that price is simply unacceptable. There may come a day when the price falls, and if it does, make sure you add this disc to your collection as soon as possible, especially if you're a Street Fighter fan. So there you go, a bunch of really good classic games in the Capcom Generations line. The only barrier to picking up these games truly is the price of them. Even though some of those games are so incredibly playable and so awesome on the Sega Saturn, their price really does put just a damper on trying to collect all 5 of them. Now, there are Capcom Classic collections that are available for the PlayStation 2 and the original Xbox that will give you the majority of these games and more, and the price of those discs are well under what the Capcom Generations line will cost you. The Capcom Generations line is also on the PlayStation 1. So you do have the option there if you are a PlayStation collector. But much like the Sega Saturn, the price is climbing on that one as well. But those games are truly fun. The Street Fighter collection, Generation 5, where you get the original, Champion Edition, and Turbo, are some of the finest home translations of those 3 games. If it wasn't for the price of it, I'd recommend it wholeheartedly. But you know how it is. You collect for an old system, especially something like the Saturn, and you're gonna pay out the ass for good games. I'm Sega Lord X. I really appreciate you guys watching, and I'll catch you next time.